Working on a 2010 Honda Accord. We are going to do the front disc brakes. First thing, of course, take the wheel off. It's a 19 millimeter with these type of wheels. And the key for the locking nut should either be in the glove box or it should be in the trunk with the spare. Step number 2 would be taking the caliper sliding pin bolts off. Top, bottom. This is a 14 millimeter. I would highly suggest using a breaker bar. I would also suggest turning the wheel all the way to the side that you're working on. We are working on the right side of the vehicle first, so we turn the wheels all the way to the right to expose this bolt, and then we can have good access to get our breaker bar or our socket wrench on there. And if it starts to spin like it's doing right now, we're gonna have to get a wrench and put it on this end. So I have a 3/4 inch wrench on this inside nut, and all you'd have to do is pull them in opposite directions to break it loose. Once you have it broken loose, you would throw your ratchet on here, and as you can see, it's actually still giving me a little bit of trouble and not wanting to, this bolt's not wanting to spin, so I just have it sitting right there to where it'll run into the control arm or what have you. It's actually going to have to go the other way. And then it'll loosen right up. Sorry if the video's shaky. And the screw will come right out. Bolt, whatever you want to call it. And you just set that to the side and you do the same thing for the bottom. Now, once you have both bolts off, the caliper is likely on there pretty good. And you may have to wiggle it around quite a bit to get it to come off. In this instance, caliper came right off. Set this out of the way. And this particular vehicle, it sits on the strut tower pretty well, and I don't think it's going to cause any trouble. Correct way to do it would be to put a line through here and tie it up to the strut tower to where the weight is off of the brake line. Don't have that available to me right now, so I'm just going to rest it right there and try to be very careful. Then we're going to do our pad inspection. These pads look great. The reason why I'm taking this particular vehicle apart is because the steering wheel shakes back and forth quite violently when braking from highway speeds. This means that this rotor has warped. Unfortunately, this also means that these pads need to be replaced as well, as you can't do one without the other. So basically, somebody had this vehicle replace just the pads, and now the work is going to have to be done twice because these can't have been replaced that long ago, that good a shape. If they're unevenly worn, like let's say one side is way thinner than the other side, then that means that the sliding pins are not greased properly. These I'm going to go ahead and grease regardless. I grease them every time I do a brake job. So you're going to actually pull this out, the sliding pin completely out, and just get it lubed up, and then you'll stick it right back in. And I should say that the sliding pin on the top, let's do the same thing on the bottom. Pull that bolt out, sliding pin out, and get some lube on it before you put everything back together. As far as taking the pads off on this, it's extremely simple. They just pull straight off. They just pull right out on both sides. Depending on what kind of brakes you get, it may come with replacement pieces here. Not that big of a deal if they don't. It's just a piece of metal. Might be a little bit noisy if it doesn't when you put them back together with the old ones. But as far as getting the brake job done, it's not going to interfere with that. We have to get the actual caliper bracket off. This is going to be a 17 millimeter, and it's better to use a short wheel. Definitely better to use a breaker bar on this, because these can get really seized up. Once you break them loose, switch it out with a ratchet, and they'll come right off. So with the bracket bolts off, the bracket comes right off. And you can just set that out of the way for now. Now here comes the hard part, if you will. Most vehicles, the rotor would just come right off. At this point, it's free, it'll come off. Honda likes to put these stupid bolts, these little screws, in the hat to hold it onto the hub. You can put a Phillips on there if you want, and you can try to get them off. Chances are, they're not gonna come out. They sell a special screw impact that you can put on here and hit with a hammer, and it's supposed to push in and twist. I don't have that, so I'm just going to drill them out. So definitely make sure you have a drill, good bits. I just buy these at the regular hardware store, just regular bits. Make sure that they're rated for steel. I'm going to start out with 3/16. Make sure you have your drill charged, and you're just going to, I always like to have a spare battery as well, but you're going to make sure that you're drilling in, and just try to start right in that center. And you don't want to drill too fast because you're drilling through steel. If you drill too fast, you'll heat up the bit, and you'll cook the bit, and it won't cut. Probably be a little bit helpful to have some WD-40 to keep it lubed as well. But as long as if you're going to go fast, you want to do it in starts and stops. Or you can just kind of do it slow and steady to make sure you don't heat that bit up. And you're just going to drill through it until the top part of the bolt comes off, and then you're just going to go down to the bottom one and repeat the process. It's a little bit time consuming. It may eat a bit or two, but it is a lot better to do it this way than waste your time trying to get that thing out with a chisel or something. Another thing I want to mention is if you start to get a real good hole in there like I have here and nothing's really happening, it's a good idea to step the bit size up. Just one exercise. So I started out 3/16, so I might go to 7/32. I really wouldn't go much higher than that, because you'll start eating into the drum, which is not big a deal, especially if you're going to replace them. I mean, if you can turn them, then it might be more of an option, or more of an issue, I mean. But if you're going to replace them regardless, it doesn't actually matter that much, except for this harder steel of the disc is going to definitely cook that bit. So just step up gradually until that comes off. This right here is success. It will end up breaking while you're drilling, and it'll look just like that. And be careful with this, because this is going to be really hot. Sometimes if you just put it in reverse and kind of shake it, just like what that just happened, it'll come off itself. Sometimes it'll get jammed. If it gets jammed, give it a second to cool off, or get a glove or a rag or something before you touch that, because if not, you're going to have quite a burn on you. But I had the bottom one off first. I kind of alternate, that way I don't get too fatigued. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish out this top one. So the top one came off right immediately as I started doing that one too. That fell right off. All right, so now we have the disc free. We can go ahead and give it a jiggle, and it's still not wanting to go anywhere. Couple things with that. Since we drilled out the bolts, one thing you'll want to make sure is that you look in here in these actual holes and make sure that it's actually free. Now on this one, if I can get it to focus, this one doesn't actually look like it freed, so I'm going to drill into that one a little bit more. Now other than that, the disc very well may be seized to the hub, and then if that's the case, you get a rubber mallet, you hammer it on each side. If you don't have a rubber mallet, get a piece of wood with a metal hammer and hammer it on each side until it frees, and then you can just pull it right off. If you're having as much trouble getting the rotors off as I am, a good trick, a couple whacks with a rubber mallet on the edge here. It doesn't have the dust guard. If that's not working for you, in these extra little holes, spray some PB Blaster. Get it around the edge of the hub here. And then get you an 8mm by 125mm screws, put them in these two alternating holes, and tighten them with a 13mm socket alternately, and it'll push against the hub and it'll come right off. So this is what it looks like when you have and it's again 8mm by 125 pitch screw, and it's 13mm bolt. So once you get them snug and they're tight, you just kind of push against it and you'll just alternate back and forth, and you'll hear it creak a little bit and then it'll pop and come right off. So came right off with that bolt trick, and to each their own, but I will absolutely not be putting screws back in here. They're not needed. It's just a waste in my opinion. So take it as you know, preference or what have you. I think honestly Honda just puts them in there to keep them on the cars during assembly, but I will absolutely not be putting them back together. I've done them on other people's vehicles, and no problem with not putting them back on there. So then this is just the same process on the other side, and once you have them off, you'll either turn the rotors if they're within spec, or you get new ones and throw them back on there and put them on in reverse. So we have the new rotors on, and we're just, like I said, we're putting these back together in reverse order. We're putting the rotor back on, then we're going to put the bracket back on. We're going to tighten those 17mm bolts up. These particular pads came with the little guides, and these just pull straight off. You just grab them right here. The old ones, pull them off. This is what the old one looks like. And same with the top, and then they just simply push straight in. You just push on them until they lock into place. And then you want to put lube right here. On this one I've already done it. You want to put a little bit of lube on both sides, some brake lube, and you'll slide them in, and then the caliper is ready to go on. Another important step is to compress the piston. In this instance, they're all the way in. If your brakes are badly worn, it's going to be pushed out. You can do this with a C-clamp. I have a special tool you can just buy at any parts store for cars, and it slides in here as so, and then you can twist this and it will push that back in. You want to make sure you take your brake cap off of your master cylinder, so any excess fluid can safely go back into the reservoir. And I always do this with a brake pad against it, the old ones. That way you're not forcing the piston back in and too far and possibly damaging the caliper.